The story of a patient arrived at 44 years without knowing they had lost most of its neurons, a case that questions the very nature of consciousness. Several years ago, a French 44-year-old male presented to the hospital complaining of leg weakness. The tests which he underwent left stunned doctors. The skull seemed awash in cerebrospinal fluid, and the innermost part, his brain, was almost completely eroded. There was only a small perimeter of tissue making surround. The case is known and was described in 2007 in an article in the prestigious journal The Lancet. These days Axel Cleary-Mans, a cognitive psychologist at the Free University of Brussels, Belgium, addressed the Association of Scientific Studies on Consciousness, in Buenos Aires. In fact, the story raises many questions about the concept of consciousness, understood as self-presence and knowledge of its existence. Public official, married, father of 2 children, had an IQ below average, 75, but nothing to suggest a mental disability. The man had come so far in a life normal. For doctors, his situation had developed over 30 years ago by a buildup of fluid, a liquid that is in the central nervous system, in the cerebral ventricles, a condition known as hydrocephalus. The man had been treated child with a stent, which in adolescence had withdrawn, leaving the liquid eroding brain tissue. How is this possible? Theories that attempt to tie the concept of consciousness to the anatomical structures of the brain are tested to see if a man may have lived his adult life without much brain tissue. The frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobe of the brain preside over the main cognitive and perceptual functions. However, the patient is minimized, a sign that the brain, over the years, had gradually adapted to operate even in this condition. For Cleary-Mans, plasticity, the brain is the key to understanding how consciousness. According to his hypothesis, knowledge of itself, a detailed knowledge of it, is obtained through experience that is enriched by learning and interaction with oneself and the outside world. This awareness reformulates and adjusts the time, trial, and error, and the brain learns from time to time to redescribe their activities. If the French man, even with the few neurons that remained, was still able to develop a theory of self, the patient then had a conscience, even though staying with only 10% of brain tissue.